how many climate refugees will there be? This is the question I get asked the most. Today I'm going to present you with a conclusive and final answer. It's just not the answer that you're hoping for, and it isn't a number. But if you stay with me, it's a long answer, but it's worth it, I hope. Two things to get out of the way first. Climate change is real and it's happening and it's caused by humans. And those changes are going to alter patterns of movement across the world. I often find that deniers jump in at this point as soon as we start questioning anything about the climate refugee narrative. So let's just get that cleared up early. It's real, it's happening, it's caused by people, and it's going to alter patterns of migration. First up, climate change alters migration via other things. For example, as the length of droughts increase, farmers are forced to spend more on irrigation, profits fall, they stop hiring workers, and some people will migrate to find alternative work. So those folks are climate refugees, right? Well, not quite. Climate change and drought have contributed to their movement, but so did the fact that there wasn't alternative work nearby, and the fact that perhaps farming was becoming less profitable for other reasons too. So climate change is part of the picture for sure, but so are several other things like the local economy, the local labour market, commodity prices and so on. In the future, climate change might even become the biggest force in these cases, but it's still tied up with other factors. Wealth and infrastructure matter as well. Places with more money and more stable governments can prevent climate-linked displacement to some extent, for example by building sea defences. Places without this kind of infrastructure are more likely to face more displacement. So are people forced to move by climate impacts like storm surges and floods, or are they forced to move because their government wasn't able to prepare and protect them against these impacts? The answer, of course, is both. What this means is that it's very difficult to pick out a group of people who are climate refugees from a wider group of other refugees and migrants. What we have is potentially a huge group of people who have a climate change dimension to their movement. Now, none of this means that the impacts of climate change on migration won't be massive. But it does mean that the way climate change creates human movement will always be mediated through some other force, like the economy or the labour market or levels of wealth and infrastructure. In this sense, it's a bit like bacon. Eating a lot of fatty food can add to the risk of heart attacks, but on its own it probably isn't enough. Other factors like lack of exercise and age are important too. In a whole population, we can see that increases in fatty food intake correlate with increases in incidence of heart problems. So there is a link, but we don't call all of these people bacon victims. The same is true of climate change and human movement. Altered weather will alter human migration, and it could fundamentally change migration in the future. But in spite of this, we can't isolate and count a group of people who are exclusively moving due to climate change. So, perhaps not the answer you were hoping for. But here is a number you can use. 23 million people were displaced by weather-related disasters last year. That's not that they're climate change refugees, but it gives us a sense of the number of people who were forced from their homes by floods, typhoons and storms. As climate change begins to mess with the weather even further, we can expect these kinds of extreme events to happen more often and to be even worse. What that means is that we can expect that 23 million figure to increase in the future.